Today we'll be working on Lesson 3.5, Introduction to Factoring Quadratics. Now this is a lesson that you learned before in Algebra 1, so this is going to be a review. We're going to page, and our job is to factor completely. So when they ask us to factor something like this completely, okay, they mean that you need to write this in terms of two factors. Now if you have two terms, like this case, you have 24x, so that's going to be the first term, and 48y, that's going to be a second term. So as you can see in this case, we have two terms. My first step every time I want to factor is to try to find a GCF, a greatest common factor. So if you look at 24x and 48y, what's in common? I can see that there's a 24 in common, so I put 24 outside of the parentheses and try to see what's going to be left of the 24x if I factor 24 out. There's going to be an x. What's going to be left of the 48y if I factor 24 out? I'm going to get a 2y. So my answer is going to be 24, open parentheses, x plus 2y. That's going to be my factor. Now, can I factor this completely or more? No. As I can see, there's nothing in common between x and 2y, so that is the complete factoring. So my final answer is going to be 24 into x plus 2y. Please pause the video and try to do the second part on your own. Now let's move on to number 2. I do hope that you tried this one on your own. And look at the two terms. How many terms do I have over here? 2. So the first step is always going to be to find the GCF. What's common between 9x squared and 6x? I can see that there's a 3x in common, so I factor it out. And what's going to be left of the 9x squared, if I factor 3x out, I'm going to end up with a 3x. And what's going to be left of the negative 6x if I factor 3x out? A negative 2. Now, as you can see, the degree for this one is just 1. So the degree means the highest power. The power of 3x minus 2, or the degree of 3x minus 2, is a 1. So you cannot factor it anymore. Now, if you want to double check if your answer is right, you can always FOIL it to double check. So let's see. 3x times 3x is 9x squared. 3x times negative 2 is negative 6x, so my final answer is right. So as you can see, my first step is always to find the GCF. And that, if that's it, and there's nothing else I can do, that would be my final answer. So let's move on to the third example, which is 2x to the third plus 10x squared plus 12x. So as you can see, how many factors do I have over here, or how many terms? I have 3 different terms, and I can see that there is an x in common, so I'm going to factor the x out. And 2, 10, and 12, what's common between them? A 2, so I'm going to factor 2 out. So what's going to be left of 2x to the third if you factor 2x out? X to the second. What's going to be left of this one? 5x. And what's going to be left of this one? 6. So when you factor 2x out, you're going to end up with x squared plus 5x plus 6. Now if you look at inside the parentheses, what is the power of this, or what's the degree of this? It's the highest power, it's 2. So you should be able to rewrite this as 2 different factors. So let me think, or take this on the outside and think about it. Now, let's look at A, B, and C in each one of those. So A is 1, B is 5, and C is 6. Since A is 1, then this should be an easy factoring problem for me. I should be able to do this mentally. And to be able to do this, you have to think of 2 numbers that you can multiply to get 6 and add to get 5. So 2 numbers that would multiply to get me 6 and add to get me 5. What are those 2 numbers? Think of all the factors of 6. Again, this should be going on in your head. What are the 2 numbers that would multiply to give you 6? 6 and 1, 3 and 2. So which ones will add to give you 5? If you add 3 plus 2, it's 5, so that's going to be my answer. 3 and 2. So then my 2 factors are x plus 3 and x plus 2. Okay? So don't forget the 2x on the outside. So my final answer is going to be 2x, x plus 3 into x plus 2. That's if your A is 1, you can do this mentally. You think of two numbers that will multiply to give you 6 and add to give you 5, 3 and 2. So these are your factors. Don't forget to copy down whatever you factored out at the beginning, the GCF. Now let's move on to the last problem. Factor completely this one. Remember, your first step is always to check if there's a GCF. Now by looking at this, I can see that there's a 2 in common because they're all even. So what's going to be left of 18x squared if I factor 2 out? 9x squared. What's going to be left of negative 48x? Negative 24x. What's going to be left of 32? 16. Now I can tell that there's nothing else in common between those three, so that's going to be my GCF, which is 2. So your step number 2 is to try to factor more. So let me look at this. What's the degree for this one? 2. So I should be able to factor it into 2 different factors. So let's try to find these 2 factors. I'm going to copy this on the outside. And let's see how we can do this. Now there's 2 different methods to do it. You can either do the big X method. This is a new method that is quick and I'd like to teach it to you. Or you can choose the method that you learned in Algebra 1 and basically you use GCF or grouping. It's called grouping to be able to solve it. I'm going to start with the big X method. If you like it, you can use that. And I'm going to also remind you of the grouping method. And also you can use any method that you like. So let me start, because they both start the same way. Now think of A, B, and C. A is 9, B is negative 24, and C is 16. Now what you need to do, since A is not equal to 1, you have to multiply the A and the C. How much is A times C? 144. So AC is 144. So you need to think of 2 numbers. When you multiply, you get AC, which is 144, and add to give you B, which is negative 24 in this case. Now remember, either method, use the first step to be this one. So you need this part for both methods. Now, what are the 2 numbers that would multiply to give you 144 and add to give you negative 24? Now, how do you get the 144? It's always A times C. You get 144. And this one is always the middle term, negative 24. Now, think about it. What are the 2 numbers? Negative 12 and negative 12. Okay? Now, once you find the 2 numbers, you can choose now to either use the big X method or grouping. I'm going to start with the big X method. Now, once I found the 2 numbers that would multiply to give you 144 and add to give you negative 24, you write them on the side. And what you need to do is you need to divide by 9. So always remember to divide by A after you find the 2 numbers. That's your first step after you find the 2 numbers. Now divide by A, and A in this case is 9. After you divide by A, you need to simplify the fractions. So negative 12 over 9 would simplify to be negative 4/3. And 12 over 9 would simplify to give you negative 4/3. So let me write them down. So once you got the numbers, you're done. You just put X in front of them, and that would be your factor. Or these 2 are your factors. Now, X minus 4 over 3 and X minus 4 over 3, these are my factors. But remember, I don't like to have a fraction. So see this bottom? You move it up next to the X. So then your 2 factors are going to be 3x minus 4 and 3x minus 4. So that's my factored form. Now don't forget that you factored 2 out right from the beginning, so don't forget to copy it down. So this is going to be my final answer. This is how you do it using the big X method. After you find the 2 numbers, you divide them by A, simplify the fractions, put X in front of each one of them, then move the bottom of the fraction up next to the X. Okay, so this is the big X method. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this to the side and try to do grouping method. So let me just go over the steps again with you that you need to start with. You always multiply A and C and you get 144. So you need to think of two numbers that would multiply to give you 144 and add to give you negative 24. And you found that these two numbers are negative 12 and negative 12. So write down the quadratic equation on the side. Now copy the first one down and copy the last one down. And the negative 24, you have to split it to the two numbers that you just found. You found that the two numbers are negative 12 and negative 12. So you split this into the negative 24x into negative 12x and negative 12x. Now after you split the middle term, you try, after you split the middle term, you group the first two together and the last two together. So let's group those together, 9x squared minus 12x, and take the GCF out. So what's common between 9x squared and negative 12x? I can see that there's a 3x in common. So what's going to be left of the non-x squared is going to be 3x, and what's going to be left of the negative 12x is negative 4. And now you try to group those two together. Now most of you will say, okay, there's a 4 in common, so I'm going to take that out. What's going to be left of negative 12x is negative 3x. And what's going to be left of 16 is 4. But as you can see, I didn't end up with what I want. I have 3x minus 4 over here and negative 3x plus 4. So probably taking 4 out was not a smart idea. Maybe I need to take negative 4 out. So if I take a negative 4 out, then I will end up with a 3x minus 4. Okay? So let me rewrite that. Minus 4 and 3x minus 4. Now as you can see, I ended up with the same factor, which is 3x minus 4. So I'm going to take this one as a common factor. And what's going to be left of the first term, or the first part, when you take 3x minus 4, I'm going to be left with 3x. So I'm going to copy 3x in here. And what's going to be left of the second term, if I take 3x minus 4 out, I'm going to be left with negative 4. So I add it next to the 3x. So in this case, these are my two factors. Now don't forget that you factored 2 out from the beginning, so you copy that down. As you can see, no matter what method you use, you're going to end up with the same answer. So it's up to you what you want to use. You can either use the grouping method that you learned in Algebra 1, or you can use the Big X method, let's say. If you have any questions, please do ask me in class. We'll have more practice. Now I'm going to give you 2 questions that I want you to try on your own. And we're going to do them in class tomorrow. The first question is going to be 3x squared plus 24x. And the other one is going to be 3x squared plus 4x plus 1. Go ahead, factor both of them, and we'll be going over this in class tomorrow.